The day I walked into Halston Tech, my palms were sweating. I had spent weeks preparing for that interview. Mock questions, research, even practicing my handshake in front of a cracked mirror. It wasn't just a job to me. It was a door. A way out of small apartments, overdue bills, and the constant fear of being replaceable. I just needed one chance to prove myself. When I stepped into the 27th floor lobby, everything smelled like money. Polished floors, glass walls, suits that looked like they came with power stitched inside. The receptionist gave me a professional smile. "Mr. Reed? Operations interview, right?" I nodded, trying not to sound nervous. She led me down a long corridor to a corner office. And there he was. Ethan Blake. Operations manager. Late 30s. Expensive watch. Perfect hair. The kind of man who carried himself like the world owed him gratitude for showing up. He didn't even look at me when I walked in. "Name," he said, scrolling through his tablet. "Daniel Reed." He looked up, finally noticing my cheap tie and slightly worn shoes. "Ah, yes. The candidate from Mason Logistics. You sent 3 follow-up emails, right?" I nodded, embarrassed. I wanted to make sure my application reached. He cut me off with a laugh. "Persistent. That's cute. But persistence doesn't make up for mediocrity." The words hit like a slap. I forced a smile. "I'm confident I can add value to your team." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "All right then, Mr. Reed. Convince me." I told him about my previous projects, how I'd cut logistics delays by 18%, how I'd automated half the reporting process on my own. He didn't seem impressed. Halfway through my explanation, he glanced at his watch. "You've got energy," he said. "But we need thinkers here, not grinders. This isn't a warehouse, it's Halston Tech." I stood there, heat rising to my face. "I just need an opportunity to prove myself." He smiled, the kind of smile that makes you feel smaller. "Tell you what. When you actually accomplish something worth mentioning, come back. Maybe then I'll apply to you." He laughed again, a low, smug sound that burned into my memory. Then he gestured to the door. "Good luck, Reed. You'll need it." I left the building numb, my stomach twisted into something heavy. Outside, the city was alive, rushing past me, not caring that another small dream had been stepped on. The reflection in the glass door showed a man trying not to cry. Not because of rejection, but because of how easily someone else could define his worth with a sentence. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing his voice. Persistence doesn't make up for mediocrity. Every rejection email after that echoed the same tone. Every doubt I had whispered in his voice. But somewhere between that humiliation and heartbreak, something shifted. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was clarity. I stopped seeing rejection as failure. I started seeing it as fuel. I worked nights, studied automation, system design, predictive modeling, anything that could make me better. I built prototypes alone in my small apartment. I took freelance contracts nobody wanted, learned from every mistake, and turned every insult into a blueprint. Years passed. I stopped waiting for people like Ethan to open doors for me. I built my own. The company started small. Just me, a laptop, and an idea. But word spread. Clients came. Then investors. Then a team. What began as a one-man consultancy became a growing firm, Reed Dynamics. 3 years later, I stood in a glass office overlooking the same skyline where Ethan once laughed at me. My company logo shimmered on the wall behind me, Reed Dynamics, where precision meets vision. My assistant entered with a file. "We've got an applicant for operations director. Strong resume. 10 years of experience." I nodded absently. "Send it over." She left the folder on my desk. I opened it and froze. Ethan Blake. The man who once told me I'd never make it, was applying to work for me. And I smiled for the first time that day. Because one day, he wouldn't laugh. When Ethan walked into my office for the interview, I almost didn't recognize him. The confidence he once wore like a designer suit had cracks in it now. His smile looked practiced, His eyes carried the exhaustion of someone who'd learned that power doesn't last forever. He extended his hand, and for a second, neither of us spoke. "Daniel," he said finally, voice lower than I remembered. "It's good to see you again." I shook his hand slowly. "Is it?" He laughed softly, trying to recover. "I'll admit, I didn't expect this. Reed Dynamics, huh? Quite the success story." "Persistence pays off," I said quietly. "You taught me that." He blinked, realizing what I meant, then glanced at the chair in front of my desk. "May I?" I nodded. He sat, placing his portfolio carefully on the table, like he was handling glass. "Listen, Daniel," he began. "About that day at Halston, if I came off harsh, You laughed," I said simply. He exhaled. "I did. I was stupid." "No," I replied. "You were honest. You just didn't see far enough." He went quiet. The silence stretched between us, heavy but not hostile. He knew what this was, and so did I. "So," I said, leaning back. "Why are you here?" His jaw tightened. "Halston restructured. New management. They let me go last quarter. And now you want to work for me." He nodded once, his pride cutting through every word. "I believe I can bring experience to your operations." "My record." I interrupted him with a smile. "I've read your record. You're qualified. Overqualified, even." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "Then?" "I believe in second chances," I said. "You'll start next Monday. Director of Operations." He looked stunned. "You're serious?" I stood, extending my hand again. "Completely." When he shook it, his grip was firm, but his eyes betrayed something else. Confusion, maybe disbelief. He couldn't understand why I'd hire him. He thought mercy was weakness. He didn't realize this wasn't mercy. It was the beginning. The first week, he was careful. Too careful. He showed up early, worked late, and avoided me whenever he could. He was polite to everyone, overly kind even, the sort of politeness that hides guilt. But old habits die hard. During a project briefing, he interrupted one of my junior analysts, a bright girl named Tara, halfway through her sentence. "We don't need to waste time on micro-reports," he said, waving her off. I looked at him calmly. "Let her finish." He froze. The entire room went silent. Tara continued her presentation. Her voice was steady, and when she finished, the room clapped. I smiled faintly. "Good work, Tara. I like your attention to detail." Then I turned to Ethan. "Around here, we don't cut people off. Even if we think we already know better." He nodded stiffly. "Understood." I could almost hear the echo of his laughter from 3 years ago, but now, it sounded hollow. Over the next month, I didn't have to do much. My silence did the work for me. Every meeting, every project, he felt the weight of my presence. Every time someone addressed me as, "Sir," I saw him flinch just a little. He wasn't cruel anymore. He wasn't arrogant. He was careful. And that was worse than humiliation. It was surrender. One night, I found him still in the office, staring at his computer. The glow from the screen painted his face in blue. He didn't notice me standing behind him. "Still here?" I asked. He jumped slightly, then forced a tired smile. "Trying to get ahead of next week's audit." I stepped closer. "You've changed, Ethan." He looked up. "I had to." "Good," I said. "Because here, persistence does make up for mediocrity." He let out a quiet laugh, the first genuine one I'd heard from him. "Guess we both learned something." "Maybe," I said. "But I learned faster." When I left that night, I glanced back through the glass wall. Ethan was still sitting there, staring at his screen like it was a mirror reflecting everything he'd lost. And I knew this was only the beginning. Because revenge doesn't always need blood or fire. Sometimes, it just needs patience. And patience was the one thing he taught me best. 6 months passed since Ethan left Reed Dynamics. Our deal with Skybridge became the story every business magazine wanted to write about. They called me the quiet disruptor, the man who rebuilt leadership. But I didn't care about titles anymore. Because somewhere deep down, I'd already won. Not the kind of victory you post about, the kind you feel in silence, the kind that only comes when you've rebuilt yourself brick by brick from the ashes of someone's laughter. One rainy evening, I was wrapping up late at the office when my assistant buzzed me. "Sir, there's someone here asking to see you." "No appointment." I sighed. "Who?" There was a pause. "He says his name is Ethan Blake." I froze. For a second, I almost told her to send him away. But something inside me, curiosity, maybe closure, said otherwise. "Send him in." He entered quietly, holding a folder. He looked smaller. Not physically, but in presence. The arrogance that once filled the room when he walked in was gone, replaced by something I'd never seen in him before, humility. "Daniel," he said softly. "Thank you for seeing me." I gestured to the chair. "What brings you here, Ethan?" He placed the folder on my desk. "I've been working on a proposal. A small consultancy firm. Nothing big, but I think it has potential. And I'm looking for partners." I raised an eyebrow. "You're pitching to me?" He chuckled lightly. "Guess the tables really have turned, huh?" For a moment, there was silence between us, the kind that carries the weight of years. Then I opened the folder. His plan was solid, focused, practical. He'd learned. I looked up. "It's good work. Smarter than before." He nodded. "That's because I finally started listening to people who once worked for me." "You taught me that." I leaned back. "What is it you want from me, Ethan?" "Investment." He shook his head. "Advice. Maybe mentorship. Maybe just a chance to do things right this time." It took me a moment to respond. Because in that instant, I didn't see my old boss anymore. I saw a man standing exactly where I had been, humbled, trying to rebuild. I smiled faintly. "Funny. You told me once that persistence doesn't make up for mediocrity." He gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "And I was wrong." "Yes," I said quietly. "You were." When he left, he turned at the door. "I know I can't undo what I said back then. But for what it's worth, I'm proud of what you've built." "You earned it." I nodded. "We both learned from it." He smiled once more. "Goodbye, Daniel." "Goodbye, Ethan." The door closed, and I sat in silence for a long time. Not in triumph, but in peace. Later that night, I found myself walking down the same street where Halston Tech once stood, the place where it all began. The building had changed. New logo. New people. But when I looked through the glass, I saw a reflection, not of the man I used to be, but the one I'd become. And I realized something. Revenge doesn't end when they fall. It ends when you rise without needing them to see it. Clapperboard voiceover, final scene. He laughed when I applied. He doubted when I dreamed. But the truth is, I should thank him. Because his laughter built my fire. His rejection became my reason. And now, the man who once sat above me, stands where I once stood, asking for a chance. Camera pans out. Daniel walking through the city lights, rain reflecting off the pavement like silver. Fade to black. Text on screen. Never let their laughter define you. Build until they have to respect your silence. The Skybridge contract was the biggest opportunity Reed Dynamics had ever faced. A partnership that could rewrite our future. Investors were watching. Clients were calling. Every department was on edge. I decided to let Ethan lead the first stage. It wasn't mercy, it was a mirror. He came to my office the night before the presentation, rehearsing his lines, sweat beading at his temple. "I've got this," he said, half to me, half to himself. "I know you do," I replied. "Just remember, confidence without clarity is noise." He nodded, not fully understanding. The next morning, the conference room glowed under white light. The Skybridge executives sat around a long glass table, waiting. Cameras. Notes. Coffee untouched. Ethan began his pitch. His voice steady at first. The slides clean, practiced. For a moment, he almost looked like the man I'd met years ago, sure of himself, in control. Then Alicia Rowe, Skybridge's lead strategist, raised a hand. Mr. Blake, she said, her tone curious, we received a second version of your proposal directly from Mr. Reed. It's far more advanced. Are you aware of those revisions? Ethan froze. No, I wasn't, he said slowly. Perhaps there's been a miscommunication. The room grew still. I stood up from the back of the room and walked forward. No miscommunication, I said. I made updates last night. Skybridge deserved a model that matches the scale of their vision. Alicia smiled. Impressive initiative, Mr. Reed. This is the kind of innovation we're looking for. Ethan's hands tightened around the remote. He looked at me, his eyes full of quiet disbelief. I continued, calm and measured. At Reed Dynamics, we don't rely on hierarchy. We rely on progress. When the data speaks, we listen, and we act. The Skybridge team nodded approvingly. One of them whispered, "That's leadership." Ethan stood beside me, silent, watching the narrative shift, the same way I once had, in his office, 3 years ago. When the presentation ended, Skybridge signed the deal on the spot. Applause filled the room. Cameras flashed. Investors shook my hand. And Ethan just watched. He didn't speak when the others congratulated me. Didn't move when the executives left. He stood there long after everyone was gone, staring at the contract on the table. Finally, he said quietly, "You planned this, didn't you?" I met his eyes. "I gave you an opportunity. You showed me what you'd do with it." His jaw tightened. "You wanted to humiliate me." I shook my head. "No. I wanted you to understand me." He laughed bitterly. "And do I?" "Yes," I said. "Now you do." That evening, HR sent me a message. "Ethan Blake has resigned effective immediately." I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed one line back, "Approved." I expected to feel triumphant. I didn't. Revenge isn't fireworks. It's a quiet room where you finally hear peace instead of anger. A few hours later, I saw him standing by the elevator, holding a box of his things. The same man who once told me I'd never belong here now couldn't even look me in the eye. He hesitated before speaking. "You got what you wanted." I walked over, calm. "No, Ethan. I built what I deserved. You just taught me what not to become." He swallowed hard. "You were better than I gave you credit for." "For years," I said softly. "I just wanted to hear you admit that." He nodded once. "Then I guess we're even." "Not quite," I said. "You laughed." I listened. "That's the difference." The elevator doors closed, and he was gone. That night, I sat in my office long after everyone left. The city lights spilled across the glass walls, flickering like quiet applause. For the first time in years, I wasn't angry. Because revenge isn't destroying them. It's becoming someone they can never reach again. And I had. Months passed after Ethan's resignation, and the world moved on. Reed Dynamics was everywhere. Magazine features, podcast invites, investor calls. They called me the quiet architect, the man who turned rejection into revolution. But I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a survivor who had finally stopped running. Every time I passed the mirror glass building across the street, I remembered that first day at Halston Tech, the marble floors, the laughter, the sting of humiliation that had built my spine. Now those memories didn't hurt. They just reminded me where the story started. One late evening, I was packing to leave when my assistant stepped in. "Sir, there's someone waiting outside. Says it's important." I looked up. "Who?" He didn't say. "Just asked for a minute of your time." When I walked into the lobby, Ethan Blake was standing there. Older. Paler. The sharp edges gone from his face. He held an envelope in his hand. "Daniel," he said quietly. "I didn't come to cause trouble. I didn't think you did." He hesitated, then handed me the envelope. "It's a thank you letter. You won't need to read it, but I needed to write it." I took it but didn't open it. "Why now?" He exhaled. "Because I realized something. You didn't destroy me. You forced me to see who I really was. And for what it's worth, thank you. I studied him for a moment. The arrogance was gone. The man standing in front of me wasn't my old boss. He was just another man trying to start over. I never wanted to ruin you, Ethan, I said. I just wanted to stop being the man you made me feel like. He nodded slowly. And you did. Then, almost smiling, he said, you were right back then. Persistence does pay off. This time, we both laughed, not out of pride, but relief. He turned to leave, pausing at the door. Take care, Daniel. You too. The doors closed behind him, and the office felt quiet again, not the emptiness of loss, but the calm of closure. That night, I sat by the window with the city spread beneath me. Rain tapped softly against the glass, the same rhythm it had the night he laughed at me. Back then, that sound meant failure. Now it meant freedom. I opened the envelope. Inside was a short note in Ethan's handwriting. Sometimes the people we underestimate are the ones who end up teaching us who we should have been. I folded it carefully and placed it in my drawer beside the original rejection letter from Halston Tech. 2 pieces of paper. 2 versions of me. Both necessary. When dawn broke, I walked to the balcony and watched the skyline burn gold. For the first time, I realized the real victory wasn't that Ethan once worked for me. It was that I no longer needed his validation to feel complete. The laughter that used to haunt me had become fuel. The failure that once broke me had built me. Revenge had evolved into something purer. Clarity. Clarity that success isn't about making them bow. It's about walking past them without needing to look back. I closed my eyes and let the morning air fill my lungs. The city was alive, endless, waiting. He once told me I'd never make it. He said persistence was a waste. He laughed when I applied. And now, years later, when I think of that laughter, it doesn't sting. It reminds me that sometimes, the best sound in the world is silence, the kind that comes after they stop doubting you, because they finally learned what you always knew. I whispered to the sunrise. You were right, Ethan. Persistence doesn't make up for mediocrity. Then I smiled. It replaces it.